support for defunding the police and for his lack of experience. But he's also concerned about the Democratic Party.
And the last election showed that the Democratic Party had lost its bearings. And we're going to redefine what the Democratic Party is really all about.
Mamdani is a self-declared socialist. His campaign focuses on rent freezes, free bus rides, housing affordability, and no-cost childcare.
This is the most expensive city in the United States of
And
America.
break
And New Yorkers are tired
this
of having to
system.
worry each and every hour of each and every day of whether they can afford to live here.
Mamdani is known for his activism, including leading a hunger strike alongside taxi drivers. A new poll released on Monday by Emerson College shows Cuomo leading with 35% support, followed closely by Mamdani at 32%. Following the city's relatively new ranked choice voting system, the survey allowed voters to rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference. After over 8 rounds, Mamdani edges out Cuomo at 52% to Cuomo's 48%. A recent Marist poll shows Cuomo breaking 50% in a 7th round of ranked choice voting. Most veteran political experts believe that the race will come down to who can turn out their supporters. Votes will be tallied after the polls close at 9 p.m. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Mayor Adams. So I want to thank all of you. Look at this beautiful display of diversity that's here. Look at people from all corners of the city and different ethnicities and faiths and groups. Not people who read about me, but people that I have touched individually, that I stood in hospitals with, that I looked at their families and made their lives better. Look at the display that's here of different languages and different
New Yorkers would be wise to put Eric back in office as mayor.
I am seeking re-election to be your mayor of the city of New York. So let me take you back, because many people have selective amnesia. So I want to take you back. January 1st, 2022, when I became mayor, there was this thing called COVID all over our city. You could walk down avenues in business districts and you see businesses were closed and people were unsure. We were all wearing masks. People were debating, should our children be in school or not? But as a leader that was unwavering, understanding the most safe place for our children were in school buildings, I stood strong and firm against the naysayers and said we're going to open our schools and we'll protect our children, but we will continue to educate them so they won't continue to have the learning gap that COVID put on them and the socialization that they need. We saw leadership and focus. Crime was moving at a higher rate. Businesses were fleeing this city. There was a level of uncertainty. Black and brown unemployment was high. Black unemployment was 4 times the rate of white unemployment. We saw a lot of uncertainty. Guns were proliferating in our city. We were burying young people at disproportionate numbers. We didn't have the housing that we needed. All of these issues were facing us, and we was inheriting that. January 1st, 2022.
Of the free world is back. Can you talk about his leadership? We saw it on full display, obviously, over the weekend, destroying those Iranian nuclear sites. Can you talk about how true American leadership is most certainly back, to the point that NATO now is saying, look, we're going to give a much greater chunk of our GDP towards defense and towards security, thanks to President Trump?
We could talk about this for hours, Eric. Let's start with the fact, and I was honored to be here in the White House Situation Room on Saturday night for perhaps the most exquisite and perfect military operation since, Wilbur Wright got on that plane on that beach, and there was the first ever instance of manned flight. To have that wing of B-2 bombers fly 34 hours and then ingress into the airspace of one of the most dangerous regimes in the world that wishes to destroy not only Israel but America and cause us the great Satan, to deploy those 14 32,000-pound bombs, destroy their nuclear capabilities, and then leave Iranian airspace without anybody knowing that they'd even been there. Not one shot fired against our airmen, not one intercepted fighter launched from Iranian forces. If you read that in a Tom Clancy novel, Eric, you'd say, no, it's just not believable. Well, that's President Trump. That's peace through strength. That's the U.S. military. That's Secretary Hegseth. Just truly, truly stunning. And of course, they caved within hours. The Iranian regime said, oh yes, the great Satan, we give up and we're going to have a ceasefire with Israel as well. Today, as a person who cut my teeth on NATO issues more than 30 years ago, again, beggars belief. I would not believe you if you'd said to me a few years ago that the alliance, which was incapable just a few years ago, Eric, of having its members to commit 2% of their GDP to their own defenses, is now, with the exception of one nation who's in big trouble, going to commit not 3%, not 4%, but 5% to make sure that this truly is an effective military alliance. It just beggars belief, but that's the power of President Trump, and that, my friend, is the quintessence of the art of the deal.
Amen. He is a historic, transcendent figure, and he is a history maker and a world changer, is President Trump. And speaking of which, Director Gorka, you mentioned the incredible strike, Operation Midnight Hammer, against those 3 Iranian nuclear sites over this past weekend. And yet we have Democrats and the left and the mainstream media, the likes of CNN, trying to downplay this, saying it wasn't successful, that Iran's nuclear program is essentially intact. What do you make of that? It seems like Trump derangement syndrome on steroids. And again, the appeasement mindset when it comes to the Iranian regime from the left. When people take bold, decisive actions, the left doesn't like that. That seems to scare them, but that's what President Trump's all about.
But it's more than that. It's really quite perverse. It's not just about being decisive and being bold. It's about loving your country. Why did President Trump put our pilots in harm's way? Why did he decide to say, we need 2 more weeks to discuss it, when in fact he was deploying our assets to destroy the nuclear capabilities of that Islamo-fascist regime? Very simply because he loves America and wants Americans to be safe. And then the mainstream legacy lying media is sad. My Newsmax buddy, Rob Schmidt, had this photograph of all the mainstream media hosts on the announcement of the ceasefire, and they all looked like their puppy had died. They were just heartbroken that President Trump, after 46 years, has put paid to the threats of the Iranian regime. I guess they're on the side of the mullahs. Yeah. They're on the side of the people who want to destroy America and Israel. It's rather telling, don't you think, my friend?
No doubt. And how could you not be in agreement with President Trump on this? This is a nation, as you mentioned, Director Gorka, for 46 years has killed Americans, referred to America as the Great Satan, and, oh, by the way, was developing intercontinental ballistic missiles. Hey, about a minute left. You mentioned you were in the Situation Room with President Trump. Give us, if you can, give us a sense of his posture during moments like this, historic moments, big decisions being made. What's it like in the Situation Room, and what's President Trump's manner like when it comes down to it in these massive, massive history-making moments?
His manner is exactly the same when he's outside of the Situation Room, whether it's with you, with one person in the Oval, whether it's with his cabinet members in the cabinet room, whether it's in front of a stadium of 60,000 people. This is what I tell people. Always ask me, what's he really like? And I have to tell them, I'm sorry, he's exactly like you see him in public, because he doesn't have that Janus two-faced nature of average politicians, because he's not a politician, he's a patriot. And what you see is the following: he listens, he asks your advice, he wants your analysis, and then he decides, because he's the commander-in-chief. That's the president. Inside the White House Situation Room, outside the White House Situation Room, everywhere.
Imagine that. That's exactly right. And more with Dr. Gorka after the break. What about these reports? And Attorney General Pam Bondi mentioned this just the other day before Congress, of Iranians entering the United States illegally. Do we know where they are? Is this a serious threat? More. Director Sebastian Gorka after the break. Stick around.
Federal District Court bench. It includes 15 judges. The lawsuit claims the judges are overstepping their powers. NTD's Arlene Richards finds out what could happen if the Justice Department wins.
In a lawsuit filed on Tuesday, the Department of Justice chastised 15 Maryland federal court judges for allegedly using and abusing their judicial powers to interfere with executive branch decisions. The lawsuit, filed in the same district court where the judges preside, claims that 2 court orders require the court clerk to automatically enter an injunction against removing any alien detained in Maryland who challenges their detention. The department claims in its filing that the automatic injunction issues whether or not the alien needs or seeks emergency relief, whether or not the court has jurisdiction over the alien's claims, and no matter how frivolous the alien's claims may be. Attorney Richard Roth explained that the judges typically issue what's called a standing order, and in this case, it's to ensure illegal aliens have their day in court.
The standing order is that should anyone be deemed to have been here illegally, then there should be a process to let them face, before they face deportation, to spend a day, to have a day in court to basically tell the court why, in their circumstances, everyone is different, they should not be deported and expelled from the country.
It says district courts don't have the authority to challenge or block the executive office from carrying out removal orders. And these standing orders violate congressional limits on district courts' jurisdiction in immigration matters. Roth disagrees and says our system is founded on a balance of power. He says the Trump administration won't win, but...
So if he wins, then he will essentially be overturning the judicial system, which has never happened in the history of this country, because the judiciary is the last branch that looks at these laws.
The automatic injunction also applies to any actions that seek to change the legal status of any alien. The government states that even immigration judges are barred from proceeding with cases that include removal orders. Roth says the government can still apply immigration laws.
So ICE can still arrest people, but what it would do is before they deport people, they arrest someone in a Home Depot and they put them in jail. Before that person's expelled from the country, they would have the ability to go to a court and explain their circumstances.
They're seeking a judgment that declares the orders violate the limitations on district court's jurisdiction and to block them from enforcing the orders. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And Zohran Mamdani, the 33-year-old New York State lawmaker and self-described.
These are small changes. Even these small changes, potentially huge implications.
Right, and viewers can read all about the detailed layout of the land, lay of the land, really, with all of these changes in your article in the Epoch Times.
Yeah, in fact, do I have time to mention one more? The business is going to allow their workers to have more options to leave standard insurance and pursue other things within the realm of human choice. So this is also these are excellent changes. Really good to have in there.
And lawmakers on both sides have, long said that the system is somewhat broken in terms of, but you're saying these small changes could forecast big change in the future.
I think so. You know, we think because of our experience with Obamacare and all the whole period, we think that healthcare reform has to be some huge package, you know, where we change the whole system fundamentally. Not necessarily. You can use these incremental changes to take the best part of the system and expand them out a little bit. You know, and with whether it's with regard to business and what they're providing, the customer, the patient, or the primary care or the physician, give each sector a little more choice. Maybe that draws more resources into the sectors of our healthcare system that do work, and away from the sectors that are expensive and bureaucratized and coercive. And this is how you reform the system. I'm just saying, maybe this is possible. If it is possible, we're going to find out. If this bill passes and these provisions go through, we could see the reforms just take place organically and naturally as an extension of human choice. And I think that's a really interesting method of reforming the system, which desperately needs reform.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you see any sense of, winners and losers in these changes?
Well, long term, I think the big insurance companies that benefit greatly from the existing systems and the HMOs and the big institutions can be losers in this. I think that's a good thing. There are clearly more changes that we need to make within the system, but this is a good start. It's not going to take away anybody's benefits that they're currently getting. All it does is permit more human choice, and provides a little more connection between care providers and patients. I would also like to see us get away from employer-provided health insurance. Sure, that was begun in World War II as a workaround for wage controls, and it doesn't really make sense that your employer should be responsible for having providing this big insurance package. Why can't you, on your own, go out into a real market, not an Obamacare market, but a genuine market, and purchase the kind of healthcare that you want? It doesn't make sense that we don't have that system. So this, under Trump's proposal, it's an extension of something he was working on in 2019, gives business an opportunity to allow their workers more choice about how the dollars that are committed to health insurance are used by the workers themselves, and then reimburses the business for allowing their workers to make these kind of choices. And it doesn't go the full way, but we're starting to see steps in a direction of reform that can be built on later.
I have seen some allegations in other media outlets about work requirements and whether people might lose out that way. Some saying that people might have to work 80 hours, 80-hour weeks.
This is a lot of high dudgeon and exaggeration, really. What they're trying to do is eliminate the fraud and the waste in the system and make the system work better as it's intended to work. And that's all it does. So they've closed a lot of loopholes that are being exploited by bad actors in the system, and they are everywhere. And so the bill goes a long way to plugging some of these problems. And there's highly technical fixes that are going to result in some people who shouldn't be getting benefits now probably losing those benefits. And that only is going to help the system function better. So I think the people that are complaining about this are really just looking to score political points and not really making rational arguments.
Okay, so for viewers out there who
that's
obviously
exactly
it's
it.
not yet passed,
No.
but if they're watching and they're wondering, okay, once it gets through, something's going to pass through.
Yeah.
How do they understand how it might affect them?
Well, they don't have to. If they're honestly, using the system as it's set up, and they're not engaged in some sort of gaming or fraud or something, there's nothing to worry, nothing to do, nothing to worry about. But for the people who are interested in having something like a direct primary care provider, on a subscription basis, that's good. If you like the idea of having an HSA, if you have one now, you can use it for example, gym memberships. That's new. Another thing in the bill that's really interesting. Some businesses, some very large businesses, provide medical services to their employees directly on site. And so this gives tax benefits to companies that do that. So the idea is to draw a closer connection between the individual who needs the care and the doctors who are providing the care. And that's something that our system sort of strangely lacks now. And everybody who's gotten caught up in the medical system these days feels in some sense that they've entered into a machine, that their choice is gone, their volition is disregarded. They don't know what to do. So this bill has provisions that enable that. You know, it's also interesting, if we really do expand this idea of direct primary care, which I like very, very much, really. I love it, actually. Then maybe more doctors will be attracted out of the big institutions, the HMO, to set up their own shops. And so now they've got patients calling their cell phone, you know, and that sort of thing. I'll tell you a quick story. My mother was, you know, she's quite elderly, and she needed some care. And it was the weekend, and the doctor's offices weren't open, and she said, "Well, I can't see a doctor until next Wednesday." Well, I called up a direct primary care person who I know, and said, "My mother's sick." She said, "I'll be right over." And she did.
Could make all the difference.
Yeah. And I told my brother about it. He said that can't be true. House calls? I said, yeah. Yeah, so this is the kind of thing. It seems almost like fantasy land. You know, like the only time you see this, the movies are all in black and white.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why it couldn't come back. You know, I mean, there's plenty of reasons why we have doctors' offices now. We didn't back in the day, and there's some good reasons. But for routine medical things, why not? You know, why not? So these are exciting. This is exciting to me. So, you know, I like these provisions because the people who think that it's hopeless, that we're going to be forever mired in high costs, bureaucracy, and a system that we don't understand and can't control.
Other refineries remain in the state. He said, "They have said that they cannot do business in the state of California. The regulatory agencies have imposed on the refiners of California
That's crazy.
very stringent regulation that makes it very difficult for them to remain in the state of
That's
California."
why the prices
One
go
party,
up.
multiple parties, I don't know. Whoever isn't willing to budge. But as citizens, we are feeling the pitfalls of their infighting. Figure it out so that we can feel some relief.
Both Valero and Phillips 66 said they will work with employees and the community to provide help and support during the transition period. David Lamb, NTD News, California.